He once stood in a small recording booth in Los Angeles, his voice soft but certain, the kind of sound that could make you stop and feel something real. It was 1997, and R&B still had a heartbeat. The air was filled with slow grooves and love songs that made the world feel warmer. But behind all the hits and radio favorites, there was another name, one that should have been written in the stars. What happens when a man born to sing is silenced by the very system that promised him the world? This is the story of Sam Salter, the voice you might not remember, but the feeling you never forgot. Let's get into his story right now. Let me know where you're watching this from in the comments. Grab yourself a warm drink, sit back, and let's start this journey together. Long before the cameras, before the recording studios, and the bright Atlanta lights, there was a boy in South Central Los Angeles who loved to sing. His name was Sam Salter. Born on the 16th of February 1975, he was the second of 7 children in a tight-knit family that lived on faith and hope more than comfort. Every Sunday morning, the sound of gospel filled the small church near their home. Sam would watch the choir sway, hands raised, hearts open. It wasn't just music, it was salvation. He sang along, his young voice rising above the crowd, pure and full of soul. The elders would smile and whisper, "That boy's got something special." But the world outside the church was different. South Central in the late 1980s was a place of noise and struggle. Sirens, street corners, the scent of ambition and danger mixed in the air. Music became Sam's refuge, his way to dream past the neighborhood's limits. At night, he'd sit by a small radio, listening to Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye, trying to copy every note until his voice blended with theirs. He wasn't just listening, he was learning. As he grew older, Sam fell deeper in love with R&B, the rhythm, the stories, the tenderness in the lyrics. While many chased rap or street fame, he chased harmony. His heroes weren't gangsters or ballplayers, they were voices. Babyface, Lionel Richie, Smokey Robinson, men who could turn pain into melody. At Locke High School, Sam started performing at talent shows. The first time he got on stage, his hands shook. The microphone felt heavier than he expected. He sang his heart out and lost. The next year, he tried again and lost again. But he didn't stop. Something inside him refused to give up. By senior year, he entered the show one more time. The crowd was restless, waiting for something good. Sam took a deep breath and started singing "Knockin' de Boots" by H-Town. The audience went silent. Then came the cheers. He won that night, and the $30 that came with it. But what he really won was belief. For the first time, he knew, "I can do this." After graduation, he chased that belief with everything he had. He joined a few local groups, performing at small clubs, block parties, and school gyms. Some nights, the speakers didn't work. Other nights, no one showed up. But Sam kept singing, always in tune, always with heart. When the groups broke apart, he decided to go solo. He spent his days hustling through Los Angeles, meeting producers, knocking on studio doors, and recording demos anywhere that had a working mic. Friends said he was obsessed, but Sam called it purpose. He wasn't just trying to be famous, he wanted to be heard. His persistence started paying off. Word spread that there was this young guy in South Central who could write, sing, produce, and even teach others how to sing. He was more than a performer, he was a musician in every sense. One afternoon, his voice reached someone who could change everything. Producer Tricky Stewart, who was working with his brother Laney at the time. Tricky heard Sam sing and was stunned. It wasn't just the tone, it was the soul behind it. He knew Sam was different. That meeting would become the doorway to something far bigger than either of them imagined. Because soon, that same voice born in a small church on the south side of Los Angeles would find its way to Atlanta, into the hands of one of the most powerful men in R&B. Before the fame, before the awards, before the heartbreak, there was just Sam, a boy with a voice the world wasn't ready for, singing to prove that dreams could survive anywhere. In the mid-1990s, Los Angeles was alive with possibility. Studios were buzzing, R&B was thriving, and young voices from every block dreamed of being the next big thing. Sam Salter was one of them, but he wasn't just chasing fame, he was chasing perfection. By then, he had become a familiar face around local studios. People knew him as the kid who could sing anything. He didn't just show up to perform, he listened, studied, and stayed late to watch engineers work the boards. He wanted to understand how a song lived and breathed, from the first note to the final mix. That dedication led him to a crucial connection. Tricky Stewart, a young producer who was starting to make waves in Atlanta and Los Angeles. Tricky and his brother Laney were building their production company, Red Zone, and needed strong voices to record demo tracks for the label's roster. Sam was perfect. When he stepped into their studio, he didn't just sing, he transformed the room. Every lyric carried weight. Every phrase had feeling. Tricky later said it was one of the most effortless sessions he had ever recorded. The demo they cut that day wasn't meant to be released, but it changed everything. Tricky sent the tape to L.A. Reid, co-founder of LaFace Records, the home of Usher, TLC, Outkast, and Toni Braxton. When L.A. heard Sam's voice, he reportedly said, "Bring him to Atlanta." Sam didn't hesitate. He packed his bags and took a one-way flight to Georgia. When he walked into the LaFace office, he wasn't nervous, he was ready. In a small conference room, with nothing but a microphone and a backing track, Sam sang his heart out. L.A. Reid signed him on the spot. At only 19, Sam Salter was now label mates with some of the biggest names in R&B. The dream was finally real. His first sessions at LaFace were electric. He worked with the Red Zone team Tricky, Laney, and Sean Sephall and collaborated with songwriters like Robin Thicke and Tony Rich. Most young artists might have waited for others to hand them songs. Sam didn't. He wrote most of his own material, crafting lyrics that felt honest and emotional. By early 1997, he was recording what would become his debut album, It's On Tonight. The studio felt like home, long nights filled with laughter, creativity, and the steady pulse of R&B. Those who were there said Sam could record an entire song in one take. His tone was warm, his phrasing flawless, his control effortless. When the team played the rough mixes back, they all knew. This wasn't just another record. It was the start of something special. He had a voice that could make you feel the truth behind every word. And for the first time, the world was about to hear it. By mid-1997, Sam Salter was finally living the dream so many young singers never reach. His debut single, After 12, Before 6, hit the airwaves, and for a moment, his voice was everywhere. Smooth, emotional, and full of quiet fire, it was the kind of song that made listeners stop what they were doing and remember what love used to sound like. The record climbed the R&B charts, breaking into the Billboard Hot 100. DJs called it grown folks music. People compared Sam to Babyface and Marvin Gaye, not because he sounded like them, but because he felt like them. Every note carried the kind of honesty that couldn't be faked. In September 1997, he released his first album, It's On Tonight. The album was pure soul, a blend of slow jams, confessions, and melodies that captured what R&B was meant to be, emotional truth. Sam wrote most of the songs himself, turning his thoughts into stories anyone could feel. Tracks like There You Are showed his ability to make pain sound beautiful. He wasn't the loudest, the flashiest, or the most commercial, but when he sang, you believed him. That was his gift, sincerity. The label believed in him too. LaFace Records had built legends before, and with Sam, they thought they had found the next one. He toured small clubs across the country, performing to packed rooms where people sang every word back to him. Fans described his live shows as intimate, like he was singing to each person individually. Behind the scenes, Babyface praised him openly, calling Sam one of the most naturally gifted vocalists he had ever worked with. L.A. Reid echoed the same. He's the kind of artist you don't come across often. Everyone in the room seemed to agree Sam was special. But even as he was rising, the industry around him was shifting. The late 1990 brought a new sound, flashier R&B, more crossover with pop and hip-hop. Labels started chasing what they thought would sell instead of what would last. Artists who built their names on pure emotion suddenly found themselves out of sync with the times. Still, Sam stayed focused. He went back into the studio to record his second album, Little Black Book. This was supposed to be his breakthrough, the project that would take him from respected newcomer to household name. He poured himself into every track, recording deep ballads and mid-tempo grooves that reflected his own story, love, loss, and survival. Industry insiders who heard early cuts said it was the best thing LaFace had done since Toni Braxton. The plan was to release it in late 1999. But just as everything was lining up, the label world changed again. Corporate mergers and leadership shifts caused chaos. Budgets froze. Projects were shelved. Sam's album never made it to the shelves. It was a quiet heartbreak. Songs that could have made him a star, songs he wrote, lived, and breathed, were suddenly lost to paperwork and corporate hands. But even in that silence, his music found a way out. A few of the unreleased tracks were later recorded by other artists, including Incomplete, which became a #1 hit for Sisqó. The song that could have been Sam's defining moment became someone else's triumph. He didn't complain. He didn't fight publicly. He just kept creating. Because for Sam, music was never about fame. It was about expression. As the decade turned, his name faded from the charts, but his voice never faded from those who had truly listened. For a brief moment, Sam Salter stood exactly where every artist dreams to be, on the edge of something timeless. Even though Little Black Book never reached the public, those who had heard its demos knew it was special. Within industry circles, it became almost mythical. A lost album whispered about in studios from Los Angeles to Atlanta. He didn't stop working. He kept writing, producing, and mentoring others. To him, music wasn't about charts anymore, it was about legacy. His voice carried a kind of patience, the sound of someone who understood that true art outlives recognition. In early 1999, Incomplete, a song originally recorded for his unreleased album, was re-recorded by Sisqó. When it topped the Billboard charts, everyone in the business knew where it had come from. The melody, the emotion that was Sam's fingerprint. Even though his name wasn't on the marquee, his heart was in the music that millions heard. And that wasn't the only one. Another song, Home Wrecker, which Sam had originally cut, later appeared on Sisqó's second album. Then came Color of Love, a track Babyface wrote for Sam, later re-recorded by Boyz II Men for their 2002 album, Full Circle. Everywhere you listened, traces of Sam Salter could be heard like echoes of a voice the industry couldn't quite erase. Those songs became hits, but to the man who first brought them to life, they were memories of what could have been. Still, Sam never spoke with bitterness. He celebrated others' success with quiet grace. Friends said he was proud that his work touched so many, even if the world didn't know it was his. During those years, he was still considered one of the most talented male vocalists in R&B. Producers respected him for his discipline, artists admired him for his humility, and fans, the few who knew the full story, called him one of the real ones. Sam's performances remained unforgettable. In small venues, with nothing but a microphone and a single spotlight, he could silence a room. He didn't need dancers or effects. His presence was the performance. People described it as church in slow motion. Soulful, sincere, and filled with emotion you could feel in your chest. By 2000, R&B was changing again. The spotlight shifted to younger acts, new faces, faster sounds. Yet, Sam's voice still belonged to an era when lyrics meant something, when a slow song could make the world pause. He started working with other artists, coaching vocals, refining harmonies, and writing songs that carried the same emotional weight as his early work. In quiet ways, he was shaping the next generation of R&B singers, teaching them that a true artist doesn't chase the crowd, he moves it. To many in the business, Sam was a quiet genius. He had the range of Stevie Wonder, the storytelling of Babyface, and the heart of Marvin Gaye. But more than anything, he had integrity, the rare kind that couldn't be bought or sold. For a while, it seemed like he had found peace in the background. The hits might not have carried his name, but the music still carried his soul. And in a way, that was victory. Because at the height of his creative power, Sam Salter had already achieved what every artist hopes for. He made music that would outlive him. But even as his songs found life through other voices, the silence around Sam Salter's own career began to grow louder. What once looked like a brief pause became a long, uncertain fade. The industry that had promised him everything suddenly had no place for him. The late 1990 and early 2000 brought a new rhythm to R&B, faster beats, club-driven hooks, and glossy videos. Labels were no longer looking for the kind of soul that came from Sunday mornings or heartbreak in slow motion. They wanted instant hits. And Sam, with his devotion to craft and feeling, didn't fit the mold anymore. He tried to adjust, but not by changing who he was. He began producing, writing, and engineering for others. His name appeared in liner notes for artists like 98 Degrees, Tyrese, and the Isley Brothers. He became the guy everyone trusted in the studio, the one who made singers better, the one who cared about tone and truth. When people asked why he wasn't chasing another record deal, he'd smile and say, "I'm still making music. That's what matters." But those close to him could sense the weight of what had been lost. The album Little Black Book lingered in his mind, like an unfinished sentence. It had been the project meant to define him. Instead, it became a reminder of how fragile dreams could be in a business that forgot so easily. He made another attempt around 2008 with Strictly for the Bedroom. The tracks were sensual, mature, and true to his sound, the kind of slow R&B missing from radio. But once again, the project was shelved before release. The momentum that had once surrounded his name had evaporated. To stay connected to what he loved, Sam turned to theater. In 2006, he appeared in Palmer Williams Jr.'s stage play What a Man Wants, What a Woman Needs, alongside Shirley Murdoch. 2 years later, he joined There's a Stranger in My House with Vivica A. Fox. Audiences loved his presence. He wasn't acting for attention, he was performing from the same place he sang from, honesty. Those years showed both his resilience and his quiet heartbreak. He never gave up, but the glow around him was dimmer. The business he once dreamed of had moved on without him. Friends said he carried it with grace. He would still show up to the studio early, still smile, still teach younger singers how to breathe through the pain. "You gotta mean every word," he'd tell them. "If you don't, no one will believe you." But when the sessions ended and the lights went out, there was a stillness in him that only those closest could see. Fame had forgotten his name, but his heart never stopped writing new songs. He kept hoping for another chance, one more album, one more stage, one more moment where the world would finally hear what it had missed. That moment never came. By the time the decade closed, Sam was respected, but rarely remembered. The voice that once turned heads in Atlanta's studios now lived mostly in memories and unreleased recordings. And in that quiet, the seeds of tragedy had already taken root, not in scandal or self-destruction, but in something far more universal, the pain of being unseen. By the early 2000s, Sam Salter was no longer on the charts, but he was still in the studio. He became a mentor for others, a quiet craftsman behind the songs that would shape a new wave of R&B. His voice, though rarely heard on the radio, was everywhere in spirit. He worked with Jesse Powell, B2K, B5, Jay Holiday, Deborah Cox, and the Isley Brothers. His guidance helped younger artists find their tone, their confidence, their own truth. He wasn't chasing fame anymore, he was chasing purpose. Still, there was a quiet ache behind that calm. He had lived the dream, only to watch it slip away. The same system that once celebrated his voice now treated it like background noise. That's what hurt the most, not the money, not the awards he never received, but the silence that followed. In 2005, Sam appeared on a song called On a September Morn with the group Talking Book. It was a reminder that his voice still carried warmth and depth. Fans who found it online called it Classic Sam, pure, romantic, soulful. But it came and went without industry attention. Still, he refused to stop. In 2006, he turned to theater again, performing in plays that toured across the country. The stage gave him something the studio couldn't, a live connection with people who still cared. Each night, he sang with the same conviction he had at 19. But behind that strength, there was struggle. The industry was now driven by trends, algorithms, and fast fame. For artists like Sam, whose work relied on emotion and storytelling, it was a lonely time. The world had changed, and he was caught between two generations, too soulful for the new, too new for the old. Financially, things grew harder. Without label support or touring opportunities, he relied on small projects, vocal coaching, and production gigs to stay afloat. Those who knew him said he carried it all with quiet dignity. He wasn't bitter, just tired. He once said in an interview, "R&B ain't dead. It just needs people to feel again." That line captured who he was, a believer in emotion, in authenticity, in music that healed instead of sold. In 2010, he signed with Elemento Entertainment and released Got Me Into Be Loved. The songs were beautiful, sincere, and filled with his signature tone. But again, the industry barely noticed. The world was too loud to hear something so gentle. Every artist reaches a point where they wonder if the world still needs what they have to give. For Sam, that question lingered quietly in the background of every song he recorded. He kept singing anyway, because deep down, he knew if he stopped, a part of him would disappear too. By the mid-2010, Sam Salter was still creating, still hoping. He had spent 2 decades giving his heart to music, and even if the spotlight never found him again, he refused to turn away from what he loved. In early 2016, he signed with Fight Club Entertainment, a small management company that promised to help him reconnect with a new audience. There were whispers of a comeback, new projects, collaborations, maybe even another album. He was seen in studios again, working quietly behind the scenes, mentoring, producing, lending his voice where it was needed. He even collaborated with Michelle, showing he still had the range and sensibility to stand beside a new generation of artists. But the truth was, the industry no longer worked the way it used to. Labels weren't investing in slow-burning artists. They wanted instant traction, viral moments. Sam didn't speak that language. He was from an era when songs were made to last, not trend. He began to fade from the public eye completely. His social media was quiet, his interviews rare. Those who worked with him said he had grown more private, more reflective. He talked often about how the sound of R&B had changed, not worse, just different. Back then, he said once, we were trying to make people feel something. Now it's like they're trying not to. Still, he was proud. Proud of the songs he wrote, proud of the people he helped, proud of the music that carried his fingerprints even when his name wasn't there. Then, in August 2021, the news came. Sam Salter had passed away at just 46. There was no headline, no breaking news alert, only a few posts from fans and friends who couldn't believe it. The reports were vague. Some said it was a car accident, others said natural causes. His family never confirmed what happened, and maybe that silence, that choice to keep it private, was fitting for a man who had always lived quietly, without noise or spectacle. What lingered instead was the emotion. Fans rediscovered his music on YouTube, posting comments under old songs like After 12, Before 6, and Once My Ish, Always My Ish. They wrote messages like, still one of the best voices ever. He deserved so much more. Rest easy, King. For those who remembered him, his passing felt like the closing of an era, a reminder of how fleeting recognition can be and how lasting true talent is. The world may not have noticed when Sam Salter left, but the ones who had truly listened, they felt it. His voice had become part of their memories, woven into a time when R&B still spoke from the heart, and when the music stopped, it wasn't silence they heard. It was the echo of what he left behind. Even after his passing, Sam Salter's music refused to disappear. It lingered like a quiet echo, a reminder that real soul never fades. It just waits for someone to listen again. His songs began resurfacing online, not through radio promotion or marketing, but through word-of-mouth fans sharing clips, covers, and lost demos. People rediscovered. After 12, Before 6, and Once My Ish, Always My Ish, and realized how much his sound belonged to a time when R&B still meant vulnerability. The melodies were warm, the lyrics honest, the emotion unfiltered. It wasn't nostalgia, it was recognition. Younger singers started mentioning his name in interviews, calling him one of the voices that got away. They studied his phrasing, his tone, the way he could tell a story in a single line. Artists from the new generation, the kind who grew up on digital beats and auto-tune, listened and learned how soul once felt human. In the years that followed, producers began referencing Sam's songwriting style again. His sense of melody, the seamless way he blended sadness and romance, became a quiet blueprint for those who came after. He had written songs that people didn't just hear, they felt them. And now, years later, that feeling was being revived. Some of his unreleased work circulated online, raw recordings from Little Black Book and Strictly for the Bedroom. The sound quality wasn't perfect, but the emotion was. Listeners could hear the sincerity in every note. It reminded them of what R&B once stood for: truth. Across forums and comment sections, fans wrote about how his music had helped them through breakups, loneliness, or simply the quiet moments of life. He made love songs that didn't just talk about love. One fan wrote, "He made you remember how it feels." That was his true legacy, emotional honesty. In a world where fame fades fast, Sam's influence grew slowly, like a candle that never went out. Each rediscovery was a small act of remembrance, keeping his name alive not through charts, but through connection. Critics began to look back and realize how much of modern R&B carried traces of his work. The sincerity of Daniel Caesar, the warmth of Giveon, even the storytelling of Jasmine Sullivan, all echoed the kind of writing Sam once perfected but never got credit for. And as platforms like YouTube and Spotify brought his music to new ears, something beautiful happened. People who had never heard of him began to ask, "Who is Sam Salter?" And those who already knew would answer, "You're about to find out what real R&B sounds like." And his life may have ended too soon, but his art outlived him. Every time someone plays one of his songs, a piece of that 1,997 soul breathes again, unpolished, heartfelt, alive. Sam Salter's legacy isn't written in platinum plaques or chart numbers. It's written in memory, in the people who still believe in melody, in truth, and in the power of a voice that never needed fame to be eternal. When news of Sam Salter's passing quietly spread in late August 2021, it didn't make the front pages. There were no televised tributes or award show montages. But in the corners of the internet, on R&B forums, YouTube comments, and late-night radio segments, his name began to echo again. People who had grown up with his music started sharing stories. Some remembered buying "It's On Tonight" in local record stores. Others recalled slow dancing to After 12, Before 6 at parties in the late 1990s. The memories were personal, intimate, unfiltered like his songs. For them, this wasn't just about losing a singer. It was about losing a piece of an era when love songs still spoke from the heart. American fans described him as the voice that time forgot. Radio hosts revisited his debut, calling it a lost treasure of the R&B age. Writers on independent music blogs began exploring why talents like Sam often disappeared too soon. They spoke about how the system had changed, how the music industry shifted from nurturing voices to chasing algorithms, leaving soulful artists behind. Yet what surprised many was the international reach of his sound. Fans from the United Kingdom, Japan, and Brazil commented on his videos, saying they discovered him decades later and couldn't believe he wasn't more famous. To them, Sam represented what they missed most in modern music: vulnerability, warmth, and storytelling. His songs crossed borders because they weren't built on trends. They were built on truth. Over time, appreciation for his artistry grew into a quiet movement. YouTube channels dedicated to classic R&B began featuring him more frequently. Playlists titled "Underrated Voices of R&B" often listed his name alongside Joe, Donald Jones, and Tony Rich. Some fans even created remixes of his unreleased tracks, giving them a second life for a generation that never knew his name. In 2022, a small online petition circulated among fans, calling for a digital re-release of Little Black Book. It didn't gain massive traction, but it symbolized something larger, a shared desire to bring his voice back where it belonged. Music historians have since placed Sam Salter among the quiet innovators of his generation, artists who bridged classic soul and the modern era without ever getting their due recognition. His story became a reflection of what it means to be overlooked, not because of talent, but because of timing. To this day, when fans talk about him online, the tone is always the same: respect, sadness, and gratitude. There's no anger, no blame, just remembrance. They speak of him like an old friend they never met but somehow knew. And maybe that's what made Sam Salter special. He didn't just write songs, he wrote feelings. He didn't chase fame, he chased sincerity. That's why his voice still resonates, years after the spotlight moved on. For America, he represents a chapter in music that deserves to be revisited, a time when soul was still sacred. For the world, he stands as proof that art doesn't need headlines to be eternal. Because some voices don't fade. They simply wait for the world to finally catch up. Some stories end not with applause, but with an echo. Sam Salter's story is one of them. When you listen to his voice today, the smoothness, the honesty, the way it carries both joy and heartbreak, it feels like stepping back into a time when music was made to heal. His sound belongs to the golden age of R&B, yet it still speaks to hearts that need reminding of what love used to feel like. He wasn't a superstar in the traditional sense. He didn't chase the lights or headlines. But through every song, every lyric, he left behind something that fame could never measure: truth. That's what made Sam Salter rare. He sang from a place that most people spend a lifetime trying to find a place of sincerity. In every note, you can hear the weight of his journey, the fight to be heard, and the peace he carried even when the world stopped listening. When the world forgot, his fans remembered. They kept his music alive, quietly passing it from one generation to the next. And maybe that's what legacy really means, not the noise, but the echo that remains when everything else fades. For those who knew his songs, he'll always be the voice that comforted the lonely, that reminded us of love's beauty and pain. For those who are just discovering him, his story is a lesson that greatness isn't always loud, and impact doesn't always wear a crown. Some artists change the charts, others change people. Sam Salter did both, even if the world took a while to notice. So tonight, wherever you are, play one of his songs. Let it take you back. Let it remind you why music matters. And when you do, remember this isn't just about Sam Salter. It's about every artist who gave their heart to the world and never got their flowers while they were here. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. Share a memory. Tell us which song still makes you feel something real. And if you believe legends like Sam Salter deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button. Because stories like his stories of truth, of soul, of quiet greatness are the ones that remind us who we are. Some stars never fade. They just shine where fewer eyes can see.